All right, welcome everybody to a Fantasy Football Friday on the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. If you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything. Like today's episode with Bob Harris from the Football Guys. Bob, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for inviting me on. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. First time to the show, so we like to get to
It
know
is.
folk a little bit. Your story is interesting in the space. You go back quite some time. I'd love to hear kind of how this thing got started for you.
You go back the year of our Lord in 1900 and no, I started a website in 1993. I started playing fantasy football in '86. A friend of mine showed up, had gone to work in another city, came back. I think it was San Diego. We were in Tucson, group of friends, and said, "Hey, you guys, I found this thing. You're going to love it." Well, we did, and and about a week of playing it, my initial thought was, we don't have enough information to play this right. People are getting screwed. People are not playing, or there's injuries you don't hear about. You get a one injury report in the middle of the week, and so I think within a few years, I was heading in the direction. I started making a newsletter for the league, and then next thing you know, I thought, wait a minute, maybe this can turn into a thing. And like I was convinced, like how much you love fantasy football when you start playing. Well, I can't be alone in this. Everyone's going to love it every bit as much as I do, and they're going to want to get just as involved as I get. So I was pretty sure this was the thing that would make me super rich and change the entire course of my life. It did half of that, and now that I'm 30 years in, another 10 years, I might even break even. But nonetheless, still, like what's better than doing something you love, dealing with a hobby that you can't get enough of, working around a group of people, an audience that honestly is as well informed as any audience you're ever going to find on the face of the earth, right? I mean, everyone out there is an expert. So I love all of the aspects of it, and just kind of how it's grown over the years has been amazing. It's probably grown the way I expected it to, and I think a lot of that came thanks to the internet commissioning softwares. People didn't have to sit around and wait for their USA Today to show up to score their leagues, etc. So it's been a wild ride, and it's not over yet. I look forward to seeing how this hobby is going to change over the next 20 years.
What you talked about first hearing about it in '86. What is the biggest changes for the better and the biggest changes for the worse that you've seen from them?
Um, I don't know if there's been a change for the worse. I'll think about that while I say the changes for the better are obviously the ability to connect with people that you don't have to be in the same town. You don't have to. It's easier to find time. We've come up with ways that take away all the bad parts of fantasy sports, or the difficult parts, or the things that were onerous and made it difficult. And I think a lot of that came with the mid '90s with the rise of commissioning software. A big part of the rise too was the NFL suddenly shifting gears and realizing, oh wow, this isn't like necessarily gambling, and these people spend a lot of money on football. Let's see if we can't promote this a little bit. And they started promoting it a little bit as well. But the commissioning software has just allowed people to connect. And instead of playing in one league and try to figure out, well, when can we all get together and have a draft, you could be in 20 leagues, and it didn't really matter exactly what time the draft was. I mean, we still do live drafts. I still do plenty of them, but for the most part, you can put long clocks on them. All the things that, all the difficulties, all the hurdles and obstacles, and we don't have enough people. We don't have enough time to sit down and do a draft. All those things go by the wayside, thanks to the commissioning softwares and the internet. Those things change the face of the hobby and the trajectory of growth, for sure.
Do you have a favorite way to play the game?
Yes, I probably do. The more involved, the better for me. I think my favorite leagues now are, start 22, full IDP, 50-man rosters, dynasty. So, I'm in a couple of those. So, I think that's a good time. But like every time there's some innovative type things that I want to say best ball is an innovation. The person that I've worked for the first 30 years of my career, Emil Cadlick, invented best ball in 1998. We were in a league called the FanX League, which was the fantasy experts, all the people, all names that you would know out there. And we wanted to do another draft, but we didn't want to manage the team. And so that was, set it and forget it kind of lineup where your points were determined by the best possible lineup. And so that right now is, I play tons of that. I play so much best ball. It's disturbing. And as we sit here, I probably have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 drafts ongoing at the moment.
Wow.
And on 3 different platforms. And by the time the season starts, I'll have hit probably 1,000 drafts. And I'm a slacker compared to my serious co-host Mike Dempsey, who will be probably closer to the 1,000 league range right now. So that I think that's like been a huge difference. Like you can sit here and it gives you the opportunity. I do love best ball, and I like this time of the year where, like, look, we're obviously picking things in teams and making guesstimates on players that we don't really know the full outcomes on. So, you kind of invest in a different way. I've kind of in recent years come to find that there's a point where you have to make the switch from best ball mindset to redraft mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like a little bit of a season. I start out in February with ball rooms open, start playing best ball. Then you start slipping into a little bit of a dynasty mindset as you prepare for your rookie drafts. And some of those, I'm in a league where we draft before the NFL draft, our dynasty rookie draft. And so that adds a layer of intrigue in that league. And so, and then you kind of get back into the best ball. And then there comes a point in August or so where you need to shift into regular redraft mode. And it can be a little difficult because you have this mindset. Well, I have enough investment in this guy, or my portfolio is loaded with this player. I need to pivot to another player. You have to dial that all in. But all of this is an exercise to get ready for those drafts that matter most in August. I think just part of it is being steeped in a subject is helpful, right? So you're sitting here and you're in a draft, and somebody's drafted, you're dead set on, I'm going to get this guy. That guy goes the pick before. Well, you don't make a panic pick because you know what ADP should be, what average draft position is, and what players are going to be available immediately after, who you can wait on, what you have to reach for, what you don't. So I think drafting is probably the best part of fantasy football. And so the more I do that, the happier I am. And I do that a lot. So I'm pretty happy, guys.
Just walking away. Let me see if I heard this correctly. You're currently in 1,000 leagues right now?
I'm not there yet. I will be there by the time the season starts.
Wow.
All best balls. So I'll set it and forget it. I'll go back in January and see, count my evil gains. But I totally forget those. My co-host on the radio is probably closer to 1,000 than I am. I'm can assure you he's well closer to 1,000. But that's that's part of the fun of this, and it is a job also. And so you want to be professional, you want to be prepared. People are asking you questions. You're doing rankings. You want to have a feeling for where players are going, what other people's views of players. It should like we always talk about average draft position. It's not telling you when you have to draft people. It tells you when people are being drafted, and that helps you, adjust your own strategy accordingly. If I like a player more than the field, I can jump up around. I'm looking at you, Anthony Richardson, and you guys might be interested. Jaden Daniels will be. Jaden Daniels is someone you're going to see on a lot of my rosters this year. That's for sure.
Absolutely, he's a hot topic. I'll throw out one quick question. So, I guess Christian McCaffrey, is he? People will say he's, for the first selection in the draft, he's 101. Do you agree to that, or do you I feel like there's a big wide receiver movement with Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill. Those are probably more appealing wide receivers. Or is Christian McCaffrey still like the unicorn, the one running back gets all the touches, that scores all the touchdowns? You still go that route with him because of the scarcity. Go ahead.
Here's the thing about Christian McCaffrey. So this is, and I should have mentioned in their DFS, which daily fantasy, which kind of had a huge spike, and it's still pretty prevalent. And what it does is it cures all the ails of season long, right? Whether you have a lousy draft or injuries, whatever, you're picking a new team every week. And one of the concepts that you need to be on top of for that is the leverage over the field at the position. Well, that carries over to regular weekly fantasy football as well, like your redraft leagues. Christian McCaffrey will give you that leverage over the field. How much leverage? Player to half leverage is what he gives you. If you were looking at last year's numbers, and this is not just, close to last year, but it, goes beyond last year. But looking at last year, I think you go to running. I think he was close to 24. He was over 24 points per game, Christian McCaffrey. Next closest was Kyron Williams at 21 points per game. You get to running back 5, you're getting player and a half leverage from running back 5 beyond with Christian McCaffrey. The receiving assets are a little closer. You can kind of cobble that together a little better. There's less of a standout. So for me, McCaffrey is the sure number one. And look, there's danger to that. I think 2 years ago, we were all drafting Jonathan Taylor as our running back 1, and he got hurt, for the first time. And That's another thing we can talk about. Injury agnosticity. I don't worry about it. Everyone's going to get hurt, and so you just you take your chances. But and I get it, people. I know you're all out there thinking, but I'm never drafting this guy because he's always hurt. Well, chronically injured is not a chronic injury, but chronic injuries are something you want to avoid. Christian McCaffrey, if we were all afraid of drafting players who got injured, no one would draft Christian McCaffrey. Look, we could go through the entire first round average draft position this year, and the only guys who have not missed time are probably the incoming rookies who might be in there and a couple second-year guys. Everyone misses some time at some point. It's a tough game. So for me, McCaffrey is the easy call. But again, if you're drafting, if I'm drafting in 1,000 drafts, and let's say I get 100 first-round picks, am I going to have 100 Christian McCaffreys with that pick? No. I'm gonna move around a little bit and give myself a little bit of coverage there. But if I'm in a single league, 100% of the time, I'm going to draft Christian McCaffrey as my 101.
Noted.
If we're talking about 12-man leagues, where do you have a preference of where you're drafting at? Is there a spot that you're like, oh man, I hope I get that? Or if you're Scott Fishbowl and they ask you, what position you want to draft, do you have a favorite draft slot?
I feel like we all outsmart ourselves on the draft spot, right? Like I think I like 10 this year because I'm going to get this and then get around and get this. Look, 1 is the best. 2 is pretty damn good. 3 is a little less good. Like I want the best players, but there is some strategy once you get outside that range to whether you want to be at the very tail end or in the middle. And that goes back towards the whole notion of drafting a lot. Like you get that feel for like what kind of players you're getting in first round, second round. And as you become more steeped in the subject, you're starting to think about round 3s and round 4 as you're drafting in round 1, right? And that's kind of the idea, is to jump ahead a little bit. And while your league mates are sitting there playing checkers, you're playing 4-dimensional chess or whatever. It's kind of helpful. But I think, I think you can, like, I want to say, like, there's some years where I really feel comfortable at the tail end. I think I prefer the ends. The first end, the front end, if I'm 1, 2, whatever, I've got a loaded player. I have a player that I love to start out with. I come back around, I'm going to get 2 picks. I'm going to get 2 really good players that I feel really comfortable with. It gets me, I feel like I have a little more flexibility at that point. I can be aggressive if I want and say, okay, this player's not making it back around to me. I'm going to grab him a little early. I think it's a tail end. If you're at 12 or 11 or whatever, you have to be a little more aggressive, or I feel like I have to be a little more aggressive because I want to not miss out on players. So if there's a player I really like and I know he's going to go in that round, I'm not afraid to take him ahead of average draft position. That's, as you say, average draft position. It's not a rule book, people. You don't have to adhere to it. You can do whatever the hell you want. And if you love a player, look, you don't have to behave like the hive mind and say, well, I'm taking him too early. Sorry, sir, I'll not do that. No, go ahead and do that. Do what you want. It's your team. You have to live with it. And something, we all need to be mindful of. And like, I get it. You want to say, like, you're halfway through the season, you want to have a chance. You want to tend to play it safe. I tend to be a little more aggressive because I can't think of anybody who came in second in any of my leagues. I remember who won them, and I can remember where I came in, but I don't remember who was second. Sure. I remember who won. And then so I try to play with that, or draft with that mindset of being aggressive. Like, there's times it's not going to work out. And maybe this is a byproduct of being in a lot of leagues, right? So you're maybe a little more comfortable doing that. Maybe if you're in a single league, you want to be a little more careful. And I do try to be responsible in dispensing my information, because you're talking to a wide range of people. And there are people who they're just in one league with the family and they want to like compete all year long. Well, there are things you can do. If you're taking risks early in a draft, you can mitigate those risks with later picks or subsequent picks if you're not waiting until later. Or you can play it safe throughout and then take your chances with later players and be more willing to jump out on the waiver wire. All those things are possible. But I do find at the tail end of the draft, if I'm at, closer to the tail end of a round to start out, I tend to get way aggressive, where I feel like I'm running uphill. Whereas if I have that first pick, I feel like I'm running downhill the whole draft. I feel like by the end of that draft, I feel really good about it. Sometimes when I'm drafting the tail end, I don't feel good about the draft until I'm about 10 picks in and I'm going, okay, it's starting to come around.
Bob, it's interesting. It feels like even just 10 years ago, it was like a race to 100 in these leagues. And George, we're in a league where I think it's like you got to get to 220, 230. Are you a purist that way, Bob, or is scoring always better?
scoring is always like more seems to be better, right? And you are right. I mean, like there was a time where like you're like, how is everyone scoring 250 points? What's going on here? Well, it's more scoring. I'm fine with it. So not necessarily a purist. I mean, I think for a while there, I avoided, like the IDP leagues, and like I didn't really start playing serious dynasty, become a more serious dynasty player until about, I want to say, into the 2000s. So I went the first, 15 years or more without really, just thinking, man, I want to play year to year. But I do really enjoy the dynasty, the building over time. But scoring, I'm perfectly fine with whatever. I sit here, I sat there yesterday, or what was it yesterday, watching Scott Fish kind of finagle with the scoring system. And I don't think they've come up with the final one. Maybe they did in the last few hours, but there were some issues with Sleeper where they couldn't get the targets and things that they kind of were hoping for. Do like that 10 yards per return. Braxton Berrios, come on down. There's a whole universe of players we could be drafting in the Scott Fish Bowl last year, thanks to the returns. And I'm looking forward to that. So, yeah, I do love those. And I love being in those leagues where they do kind of push the envelope. The Fish Bowl is one of those. The Fantasy Cares Eliminators, I love those, where you draft. It's a 17-person league, and you just make it week to week, right? You're just trying not to be the low score. And there's some really unique lineup builds. And it's crazy. It has no bearing on what you're going to do in a redraft league or any normal league. But on their own, they're super fun. And I love doing those as well.
I'm actually in a league where I'm in a purist per se. He's a standard scoring, non-PPR, no fraction points. It drives me crazy. So I like the scoring in my perspective.
I'm still in one of those, and it's interesting, but it gives you a chance to kind of take a different approach when you're drafting. And so I don't mind that at all. I just don't want to be in too many of them.
I agree. So speaking of approach, right? So you talked about you drafting all these different teams. I'm just curious, what offenses are you chasing this year? Like, what do you? There's definitely you want some shares, and like for instance, the fantasy community. I'm seeing the Bears getting a lot of love, like in regard to the wide receivers. Like they want to double dip and kind of stack those teams.
Yeah.
What offenses are you chasing this year, in your opinion?
I think Green Bay is one we're all going to be looking for some value there in the receiving core. I think there's some cheap plays with upside. It was Dontavian Wicks for a while. Now I'm warming up to Christian Watson. As a wide receiver 4, right? Like you've got to put those things in perspective of what you're getting and what the potential upside is. I think the Packers are one. The Lions, I think we've all decided that they are imminently chaseable. It seems like it's all NFC North. The Bears. I mean, there's some good pieces there. I don't know that I'm like out chasing them. I'm kind of letting other people be more aggressive on that. And I think like it's more individual players than offenses, but there are offenses I want a piece of. Those are some of them. I think the Houston offense I want a piece of. Philadelphia for sure, always. And Saquon Barkley looks really appealing. I just got a share of him, late first round share, and I think that's the first one I've gotten this season. So there's a handful of them that but a lot of times, like I'm trying to be a little more contrarian and look for other possibilities. Like, I see you out there, Panthers. I see the things you're doing. You're trying to get better. And, it was horrible last year. And as horrible as it was, and Bryce Young having an historically bad season for a first overall pick in a draft, somehow Adam Thielen, and like they were tied for the last in the league in scoring with New England. Somehow Adam Thielen was a wide receiver 18, a guy I drafted as wide receiver 6 100 times at least last year, more than paid off. So, I mean, even the worst, like I talk about this a lot. We tend to get scared away by what we view to be less than ideal quarterback situations. We could look at DJ Moore last year playing with Justin Fields and Tyson Bagent, comes up and had a fantastic season. We could look at Mike Evans. We weren't sure Baker Mayfield was going to be a success, yet here was Mike Evans inside the top 10, well inside the top 10, guy that you were drafting way later than Amari Cooper a couple years ago, wide receiver inside the wide receiver 10, playing more than half the year with Jacoby Brissett, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett in the year we didn't know that Geno Smith could still play football. We draft these guys way down the line and we're getting great values on them. They're really good players. And it turns out really good players are going to come up with reasonable production, maybe even higher end production than we expect. It's like the fear thing, right? Like we play that up in our mind. We overplay it as got like a defense mechanism, right? Like what's that sound outside the cave? Well, I'm sure it's a saber-toothed tiger. Well, it ends up being a mouse, but you're still going to walk around like a saber-toothed tiger. We're doing the same thing with quarterbacks, right? With our fear of will they be good or not. Turns out that offenses can get things done with less than ideal quarterbacks. So like, I'm not saying run out and draft guys on bad teams, people. I'm saying look at the price. Everything in context with the price you're paying. and the opportunity cost early in drafts. So you can focus on those guys on the offenses we're talking about. The Eagles. I mean, that's like easy money there, right? You want to have a ton of that. I think we're all looking at the Houston Texans this year. We'll be looking at a number of teams that we want to have great shares of, and you draft those guys earlier. Buffalo Bills, we're going to want some pieces of that. Although we're still trying to decide what all pieces we want of that. We know we want Josh Allen though. He's going to keep Josh Allening, and so I mean, we want tons of the Chiefs, and I think there's some reasonably priced assets there. I think for as potent as we think that offense is going to be. And last year, maybe a little bit of a downturn, and maybe we're getting a little bit of a discount on some of the high end players, like maybe Travis Kelce going after Sam Laporta.
I saw that.
It's a chance to get a little bit of an edge. He is not going like I think a little rebounds in line there. They've got some speed assets there, and that's been the thing for them. Like you look at some of the shifts that have been made. They lose Tyreek Hill. They lose all that speed. Well, since that speed left, Patrick Mahomes' average depth of target has dropped down noticeably. Does that rebound this year with Xavier Worthy with the 4.21 40, and by the way, Marquise Brown with a 4.27 40? You got two guys who are blazing runners. Does that open things up in the middle for Travis Kelce, something he hasn't been able to benefit from as much? And does it benefit Patrick Mahomes? So there's a lot of things that, a lot of offenses I'm looking for, but I'll look at those other offenses that aren't as good. Arizona Cardinals, I think are an interesting offense, just in that I was impressed with the way Kyler Murray came back. This guy's been running air raid offenses since he was 2 years old, right? Comes back to a more traditional offense that Drew Petzing installed in Arizona. He clearly put a lot of effort into that. He was not just playing video games, people. He was putting in the work while he was recovering from the ACL, and he ran that offense well. So I like, and I do like Marvin Harrison. There's something out on Twitter right now about me putting the brakes on Marvin Harrison. I am, because he's going as wide receiver 9. I'm not necessarily looking to draft unproven players at their ceiling or at their anticipated ceiling, but I'll still have some shares of him because I think he might be really good in this offense. I'm just looking at the players I'm missing out on when I draft him as wide receiver 9 that are maybe more proven. So I do think there's so much out there. There are so many different directions to go. And that's one of the reasons when you're drafting this many teams, you can sit there and you can differentiate and try different approaches. You say, you're drafting from different spots. Well, what kind of build can I get if I start out going running back here? Or what kind of build can I get if I go wide receiver here? If I go receiver, running back, tight end, or, you can try all the combinations are available to you. And over the course of an off season, you can kind of figure out, hey, this is the one that works for me. I do think it's interesting too. We talked a little bit about Scott Fish. It's a 2 quarterback kind of league. Every year the super flex and 2 quarterback leagues, they tend to take on lives of their own. You never know how it's going to go. Some go quarterback crazy. You're going to have, the first 2 rounds, almost all quarterbacks. Sometimes you'll be in a league and it just doesn't go that way. Everyone gets 1 quarterback in the first 2 rounds. Then people are kind of chill about it. You just don't know until those drafts are off and running. So I find that super fascinating. I tend to get a little quarterback greedy, in those circumstances, because if you don't have 3 that are going to play all year, you might get a little bit of a pinch. And I do agree. Something my friend Marcus Grant over at NFL Network talks about a lot. We kind of used 2 quarterback and super flex to bring the value of quarterbacks closer to what it is in the NFL, but we haven't actually done that. We need to do changes to the scoring more than we're doing. We're creating scarcity. We're not creating a situation similar where the quarterbacks are commanding, the similar kind of a role. We're just creating a scarcity. And that being the case, we usually end up, building races to see who can get the most quarterbacks the earliest. So, or at least that's what it seems like it's become. So maybe a little more innovative thought. I'm looking at you, Scott Fish. Get busy.
Bob, we do a segment on this show called the Vet versus the Rookie. I went to footballguys.com, looked up the ADP, and one will be a rookie, one will be a vet. You tell me which one you like at that ranking. So we've got Xavier Worthy at 95 or Amari Cooper at 50.
I'm going to take Amari Cooper all day there. I think Xavier Worthy might be fine. He might be a better asset than we think. But as long as there are other pieces there, namely Marquise Brown, who, I get it. He's kind of been middling, right? Given, but at some point the circumstances might click. And if they're going to click, are they going to click with Patrick Mahomes? I think the odds are as good for him as they are for Worthy in this circumstance. Still a Rashee Rice there, still a Travis Kelce there. I think they always can go run heavier there. I think for me, Amari Cooper is a guy that's totally underdrafted. Like, repeatedly. I said 2 years ago he was a wide receiver 10. Last year down the stretch, I know it was playing with Joe Flacco, but he was almost unstoppable. He had a historic game in Week 16 against the Texans, a league-winning game. Right? If you were in your playoffs at that time, you crushed somebody like nobody's business. He's capable of those numbers. And you say, I know, but it's Deshaun Watson. Well, he averaged 18 points a game in 5 games with Deshaun Watson last year. I mean, he had good outings with Deshaun Watson. I'm not sold. I'm not trying to sit here and sell Deshaun Watson, but I will sell Amari Cooper. I think that's a screaming bargain at that price.
Jaden Daniels at 125 or Jordan Love at 74.
That's totally unfair. I am so, like last year, Anthony Richardson was the nail and I am the hammer. This year it's Jaden Daniels. That is a tough one. I do think it's like totally reasonable. I would probably go with Jaden Daniels because I'm looking for that rushing upside. I don't think anyone's going to argue that Jordan Love, as good as he is, and I think he's going to be fantastic, has that same rushing upside, right? And I think that's the thing. I'm sitting here, if I go into the store and I see a bunch of lottery tickets there, and I have all these lottery tickets to choose from. Oh, this one has a $50,000 prize. This one has a $20,000 prize. Oh, look, there's $1 million prize. I'm probably going to buy that ticket. Come on down, Jaden Daniels.
Ben Sinnott at 195 or David Njoku at 83.
It's a trap. Ben Sinnott's a trap. I mean, all the skills, everything you want to see. That offense has the Cliff Kingsbury offense has produced some strong tight end numbers at times. It's not a primary focus of the game, though. I do like Sinnott an awful lot, but I'm going to go David Njoku and take my chances. I'm hoping, I get it. The big points have come with quarterbacks not named Deshaun Watson. I'm hoping they get this all sorted out. And that the late season run Njoku went on last year is something that they can build on, even with Deshaun Watson. Besides, I have way too much Zach Ertz to be investing in Sinnott.
Is that right?
Not way too much, but enough.
Trey Benson's at 117. Zamir White is at 76.
Zamir White all day. Clear path to workload. At running back, I want clear path to workload. Zamir White's a screaming value. What he averaged 114 yards from scrimmage over the last 4 games last year without Josh Jacobs. You kind of say, well, will he continue doing that? You look at Antonio Pierce, you can tell what that team wants to do. Right? And when you bring in Luke Getsy as your offensive coordinator, that adds to the vibe. You sign Alexander Madison, who doesn't seem to be a big threat. You didn't do much in the draft to change that. I'm going to have a lot of Zamir White this year, and I think that's a crazy good value. Trey Benson, I think I love him among the rookie backs, not named Jonathan Brooks, who I'm not that excited with this year because he's coming off the ACL. The size and speed, I like it when the number after the 4 is a 3, when we're talking about the 40-yard dash. I like it even better when the person running that is 216 pounds. I think long-term, Trey Benson is going to be a great play. I think this year he looks more like a third down option as they kind of work their way through the James Conner era.
And how do you see the Washington backfield sorting out between Eckler and Robinson? It'll be an interesting one.
Eckler is so beloved by the fantasy community because he's involved in it. He gets it. He's on. He loves what we're doing. He's part of it. He plays it. I'm going to have so much more Brian Robinson Jr. than Austin Eckler. It's not even funny. And I do this a lot. I'm going to buy the cheaper piece of ambiguous backfields. I don't know how ambiguous this is, though. I mean, just to me, this seems like it's a more situation where we're going to see a ton of Brian Robinson Jr. We'll see Austin Eckler coming in, chipping in, I don't want to say an Antonio Gibson-like role because it's new offense, but kind of in that total secondary spot. Look, maybe there's a chance Austin Eckler last year. I mean, he got hurt early. Maybe that injury was a bigger deal than we knew. Or maybe, as running backs tend to do, they just get that spot where they lose effectiveness. I would rather take a chance on Brian Robinson at a cheaper price than I would Austin Eckler. And even as I say that, I will go ahead and openly root for Austin Eckler to make me look stupid.
Early results of Brian Robinson looks pretty good too, for the most part.
Right.
Quick question for you. So I'm just kind of curious, how much do you weigh team schedules and team divisions when you're going into fantasy, or do you even weigh it at all? Do you look at the AFC North, oh man, I don't want to draft a player here because it's a pretty black and blue division in regard to that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think more that is of interest in the actual schedule. It's like, where are they playing, when they're playing there, and what kind of games those divisions have. Yes, AFC North, we all know that's the tough thing, but also, there's I think when you're talking about strength of schedule, which we all like to pay attention to, I like to pay less attention to it, at least until the season starts. And then I need to know when the bye week is. But there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of dynamic moves going on in terms of personnel on defense that change things a lot. There's going to be teams where I'm always going to say, oh, that's going to be a good defense. It's going to be tough. But when I'm drafting players, I'm not drafting, okay, I've got to avoid them. Now, if you're playing like in a big tournament or the Scott Fish Bowl or whatever, you do start looking at the late season run. You want to have something, if you can get something more favorable. But just remember, when you're saying it's favorable as we head into the season, you're saying we perceive it to be favorable because we do not actually know if it's going to be favorable, right? Absolutely. So take that into account. Like, I think it is a hair splitter, right? And as I think a lot of things are. Like, I'm going to draft a better player, and if I'm sitting there, I'm looking, okay, well, there's two guys that I like an awful lot. They're in the same spot. Which one has the more fortuitous for me buy? Which one has the better end of season schedule? Maybe that's when I start taking into account injury histories, things like that. When players are very close together and I'm trying to like make a hard decision between two players that I like almost equally.
Everybody's trying to put together the best stacks these days, Bob. Stacks. It's all about stacks. Do we ever think it trying to put together the perfect stack?
Yes. Stacks are something you do for DFS tournaments. Right. And so I think of things. So I'm going to put a little different definition on this. Stacks are not two players. That's a pairing. All about that. Do that all day long. You find a good offense you like. You have players you're comfortable with. Pair. In DFS, stacking is where I'm trying to add three or more players from a single offense in a single game that looks super fortuitous. It looks like I'm going to be able to take advantage of a really favorable matchup. And you will often run that back with something from the other side. So I think I think the stacking and redraft, like, it's a little bit more relevant to me in best ball, where maybe I do want to have three guys from a single offense. If it's a really good offense, I'm more likely to do that. In redraft and regular play, I'm probably not as eager to do that. Putting all your eggs in one basket is great. Also, when that basket is rolling down the field, only one of your eggs can be doing something for the most part, right? And so if you have a bunch of pieces, like what if it's a big game for the running attack and you have the running back but you also have the receivers? Well, one of those guys is going to be sitting there chilling while your other guy is doing something. So I tend not to overplay it. Again, pairing quarterback with a receiving asset or running back, I think, or tight end, however you want to do it, I think is perfectly fine. And if I get three, it's not going to do me in. I'm hoping I don't have to play them all every week, because I think you're going to end up with some really disappointing weeks.
So DFS is something I really want to explore and look into more. I haven't really played it, to be honest with you. Like, I've seen it, I love it. I'm just kind of curious, what are some of the metrics that you look into that are very important to you in regard to, I want to dip into that game? Are you looking at like the cost of the player? Are you looking at the spread between the two different teams? Like, what are you looking at regarding that?
So I am notoriously a tournament player. I work with people. Jeff Manns, my co-host on Sirius on the game day show, on the pregame show, is a great builder of bankrolls and a head-to-head player. I'm not that. It's like, and that's a whole different vibe where you're, you just have to outscore half the field, or, it's a whole different thing. When I'm playing tournaments, I am looking for, I'm looking for the point totals. I'm looking for the anticipated total for each team, and I'm trying to leverage that against individual matchups. And you're looking at the cornerback receiver matchups and the pricing. All those things come into play. And that to me is like, again, I used the lottery, analogy a lot, because it is, you're basically, like, I love having a handful of lottery tickets that I can use to root for the games while I'm watching the games. It just raises my level of fun and interest in the games as I'm watching them on a Sunday, knowing that I have a bunch of lineups involved. And so that's pretty much my interest. I want to play tournaments. Tournaments are something that, you should not expect to win all of them, because you're not going to win almost any of them. But I do tend to come close to breaking even. Like, unless I get a big win or a solid win, that'll put me ahead for the whole year, and but that's all it takes is one good win. So, you can kind of bankroll yourself. So for me, it's almost more of a fun thing. There are people who do this as a serious avocation. I don't like to mess with those people because they're really good at what they do. And, and so I'm playing more my redraft, my dynasty teams, and dabbling as a tournament player in DFS.
Bob, this was a real pleasure. We had a great time today, and we appreciate you sharing a little bit of your expertise with us today.
Well, it was very kind of you to have me on. I appreciate it, and I hope you do it again.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.